In JavaScript, objects are very simple. It can often be just a simple key map value, or even if you use a class, it's very straightforward to create a JavaScript objects. But if you have some complex requirement, like if you want to observe an object or you want to intercept before a value get updated, you want to emit some kind of event when something change, how you can do that? Now, one standard pattern what JavaScript introduced in year 6 that is called JavaScript Proxy. Now, today we're going to talk about how the whole JavaScript proxy work and how we can utilize it to observe and intercept the object's changes. Now, before we go there, a little bit about the setup on which we're going to work. So I have my VS Code running. It has index.html and the proxy.js file. Whenever I change it, there is a hot module reloading is there, which kind of refresh the page, and we will see the logs in the console. So let's first learn what is a JavaScript proxy. Now I have a simple image which can explain what is JavaScript proxy. Now a proxy is nothing but an object which comes between your code and your target object. In case you would like to kind of intercept something on your object, like in this case, this particular one, you create a proxy, and the proxy can have a series of handlers. These all are optional handlers. Only when you provide it, it let you intercept or modify something before in the code you try to kind of access that value or try to set some value. So all these handlers actually help you or kind of make sense of the proxy. Now we're going to cover each handler one by one, but we will start with with no handlers. In that case, is basically the proxy is referencing to the object directly. We're also going to touch a little bit about Reflect. Reflect can work, it's also an API introduced in year 6. It can help you a little bit in your proxy setup where you want to modify the objects. In those cases, Reflect can help you to solve these things in a little bit easier manner. So let's jump to the code and try to learn proxy in step-by-step manner. Let me close this sidebar so that we can focus on code. Now I'm going to start with creating a simple JavaScript proxy. To do that, all you need is a proxy, and you can just say new proxy. A proxy object, a proxy constructor take two arguments. One is the target object. In this case, it's a user on which we're going to put in the proxy. And second is a mandatory configuration object. In that, you can provide your series of handlers. But in first case, what we're going to do, we're not going to put any handler. We're just going to see that how it's actually work. And in that case, now we have created a proxy without any handler. So it's basically referencing to the same object. Let's try to do that. Let's try to modify something in the user object and see that if that's really working. So if I say proxy dot name, and we started with the name John. Let's say if I put it Mark here, and I want to see that if it's really working. So if I said just say console.log and put my uh, proxy object here, you can see that it's already printing the proxy. And if I expand it, you can see that it has a proxy and with the name Mark. To keep it simple, if I just say name proxy dot name, and you can see that VS could already understand that it's a proxy over user, and that's why it's giving us autocomplete. If I just go back, you can see that it has both age and name property. So in that sense, VS Code kind of help you out there as well. If I just do it and just put age as well, you can see that the name has changed to Mark and the age remain as 30, which we haven't modified. So this is the basic proxy, like how you start with it. Now we're going to going to put some of the handler. Now we're going to start with first with the get handler. Now get handler has few use cases where you can use it. It can help you. One, it can help you to retrieve the field value in the way you want. And let's say there's another use case could be, let's say you want to put some kind of restriction or access restriction on some field. It can help you there as well. So we're going to try both the way and see that how that works. Now to return a value, if I just say, if I would like to put a get handler, all I have to do is put a get here, and you can see that it's an optional property. And if I put it get like this, the get handler take three parameter basically. One is the target, that is the object on which you're going to put the proxy. Second, the prop, basically which particular property you are trying to access, and this work both for the property as well as the function. And third is the receivers. Basically, this is the proxy object on which the value will be reflected. In our case, we're just going to use the target and prop, so I just remove the receivers for now, and just to keep things clear. Now, to keep things simple, if I just say return dot target and just say prop, what's going to happen? It's basically nothing going to happen. It's just is going to come to the get, and in the target it try to fetch the property what you're trying to access, and then just return it. To prove my point, let me just do a console.log, and let's say fetching via proxy, and let me just put the field name or the prop with what we're trying to access. Let's see if I just save it. It says that for the first one, when I say proxy.name, it says fetching via proxy name, and then it's going to print the value, and then same goes for the age. So in that case, it putting as like kind of interceptor, but we right now we are not trying to do anything out of it. We're just basically returning the value. Now next thing what we're going to do is we're going to put some kind of access restriction. That let's say in the field in the user object we only want people to use the name and not the age, and whenever they access the age we want to throw some kind of error on the console. So how we can do that? So what we're going to do, we're going to put some case here. If we're going to say prop equal to age, so if somebody is trying to access age, what we want to do is we just want to first print out an error which says each field is not accessible publicly, right? So, right, and then accessible. All right, and then just return whatever value we want. In case we want to return a null, that is fine. Just to keep things clear, I'm just going to return a capital null. So that's very, very clear. That's what we are trying to return. And whenever if property is age, then just return null. For everything else, just continue as it is. So this will work as more like kind of restriction one. So you can see that. Let me just delete this console log. Right. So it's trying to access name, and that's no problem because it's not restricted one. On second one is throwing there's a console error. So this kind of thing you can do it. You can put some kind of restriction on your field, the way kind of the field what we want people to access publicly, and in case we don't want them to access publicly, we can kind of throw some error. So it just show you some power of proxy. Now next what we're going to do is we're trying to use another handler that is called set. And with the set, we're going to try to learn a little bit more about the proxy. The first use case what we're going to handle is basically to check the format of a value. So let's pick the age, and we want to check two things. First of all, if it is an integer, and if it is an integer, then is it in the right range? And we will say, like, for a human, the possible age is between 0 to 150, and we're just going to put some kind of validation error there, right? So to put on focus on set, let me just clear the get part now, or let me just leave it as it is. Let me just comment this part. It will kind of trouble us because we're going to work on mostly on the age. So on set, it's just like get. It also kind of pass you few of the argument. First is target, second is the prop on which you're going to work, and third is the actual value, because it's a setter one, so we need to know for the object the property what we're trying to set and the actual value. Now let's see. What we want to do is basically want to put the some validation on the edge, right? So what we're going to say prop, and if prop is age, then I want to have my kind of my validation in place. If not, then I don't want to do much. I just go ahead and set the value. So that is target prop equal to value. As simple as that. Now let's focus on the validation part now. The first validation is type integer. Integer, right? So this is what we're going to check. Now what we can say that if it is not, and just we're going to use number utility, and if it is not an integer, that is the value, we want to throw some kind of error. So we just say throw new type error, and we will say um, provided age value is not an integer. Now this will do our job. Let's see, like, if this is working. Let me comment these two guys. I guess we don't need this one as well. Let me just clean it up so that it's just clear. Right. So first thing what we want to do is proxy dot age equal to 30. This is our success case. Right. And then we'll go to the error case. And in this case, if we try to set a string 30, then we are expecting error. All right, so seems like it's already throwing the error. If I just comment it back, it's all working fine. I can just have console.log, and proxy. All right, so age 30, all right, nothing, no problem. And in this case, if we just put it a string value, then it just throw the error that age value is not an integer. Right, so the first case is working fine. The second is like we want to put some kind of range validation. So range validation is the value should be between 0 less than equal to and value less than equal to 150. Right, so this is what we want to put. So let's have one if statement, and which says the value must be greater than equal to 0, and the value must be less than equal to 150. All right, so that's what we want. Um, yeah, but in case we actually want the error to be thrown, so if it is value is less than equal to 0, or basically, and value is greater than equal to 150, right? In this case, we want to throw an error just like above. So throw a new range error, and the value could be age value is out of range. Let's see. All right, so let's move this guy, and in this case 30 is fine. The error case could be 300. You can see it's already coming. Let me just first go to the non-error case. All right, no problem till here. 300, again out of range error, -1. and then again we got the value as out of range. So it seems like it's all working fine. So we are good till here. What next? So another things what we can do is basically kind of infer the value. And infer the value could be like you can create another field in your object depending on your value. For example, let's say if I have a use case where I want to figure out like if the person is an adult or not, right? And I need a property called is adult. Can I do that with the proxy? Of course we can. What we can do whenever someone set age value, what we can do, we can check and try to put is adult property, and we say is adult, and someone would be adult if the value is greater than equal to 18, right? We already checked that it is if it is a not integer, it will throw an error. If it is out of range, it will throw an error. So we just good with the directly checking the value, that we don't have to verify again that it's a string, it's an integer or not. Let's see if I do that and try to print. Um, all right. So for age 30, it seems like it's all good. Um, if it is a person with 16-year age, then it's false, right? So that's what we want basically. In case of anything above 18 and equal, we want it true, and for everything below 18, we want it to be false. And that's how we can infer the value. We can um, add additional property depending on the other value on your object. So now we have understand the basic of proxy, the get handler and set handler, right? It's a time to clean up the code a little bit. And to clean up the code, we're going to use something called JavaScript Reflect APIs. Now, JavaScript Reflect APIs was introduced at the same time when the Java proxy was introduced, and they work very well together. Let's first understand that how it's actually work. If you remember this diagram, what we discussed earlier, we have something called reflect here. Now, to modify an object in all these handlers, there's one way is that you go ahead and modify the object directly using the target and the prop. Or there is a way to kind of simplify the process using the reflect. And reflect APIs come very handy in most of the time. We're just going to see next that how it can solve our life. One is, let's say this one, the target prop. Now what we're trying to do, we basically getting the object and trying to fetch the property from the object. Simple enough, but we can have the reflect API to solve our to simplify this line a little bit further. With reflect, all you need is basically reflect has an API called get. You can just simply put get, and then you can have the arguments put together here. Now arguments, you must be knowing that arguments with every function after ES6, you get a kind of implicit property, that is argument, which is nothing but all the argument you provide as a function call. Is basically the array version of it. With this is basically does the same thing. It's kind of let reflect to kind of fetch the property and return it back. Similar thing we can do it here and here as well. In this case, what we're trying to do, we're trying to set some val property into the target object. So reflect has its own version here. So if I can just say um, return reflect dot set, and then set take three properties. First is the object on which you're going to work. Second, the property, and in this case we want is adult. And third is the value, right? So we can just copy this part here, and it will kind of take care of of doing this. And the last is the target props. So we can use the setter version of this particular line, and in this case, if I just put it a comment here and just do a set, that's all. If I reflect it, you will see there is no change, and which is a good thing that it's all working seamlessly, right? If I just want to prove my point and I put like double underscore here, you can see that is also coming. Perfect. So you can see already that reflect solve kind of simplify the uses of proxy in a extent. Now we know the basic of JavaScript proxy, how the get handler work, how the set handler works. Let's put all this concept into some meaningful solution. In this part of video, what we're going to do, we're going to build something like a decorator. The way it works is basically we have something called logger. Now what we want is basically whenever a greet get called on the user object, we want a kind of a pre method to be called and we want a post method to be called. So I just use the nomenclature of React like a will and did call. Idea is just the pre and post of the method call. And we want to do it without disturbing the greet method, right? So you can think about it like it's a very common use case in daily development, right? In case you want to put some kind of logger, you want to put some kind of analytics, all those things can be used. And in many times, those are not actually directly direct code of that particular method, right? So kind of disturb a little bit of cohesiveness. In this case, we're going to solve that problem. We keep the method very cohesive and just make sure utilize the proxy to have this pre and the post call. So how to do that? Now, to do that, what we can use is basically we can utilize the get handler. What we can do here is, and one more thing I forgot to mention is we also want to print the argument which is get called whenever you do a greet. So in this case, when I'm putting hi, we want that to be passed so that in case of analytics or the logging, in case we want to pass it to the server, we should be able to pass it that this particular method was called or did call because with this particular argument, right? So all those are the requirements. So do that. Let's create a proxy. So in case if we get a property called greet, right? So prop equal to greet, we want to kind of work on it, right? So in this case, all our functionality will come into picture. Now, through in our previous part, we already used the if, so let's change the pattern a little bit, and in place of if, let's use the switch case, which just work in the same way, but just a different style. So I want to put a kind of case of greet, and this is where our logic will go. Let's compare the default part of it. On default, we want nothing but just return and have our reflect API in place, reflect.get. And if it is not greet, we don't want to do anything further. We just want to return it, whatever been asked. No problem there, right? I guess we had it here already. Right, so this is done. Now, if greet is there, then we want to change things. To get the argument, what we have to do is basically we have to provide some kind of function. Now, this in place of actual greet function, this particular function will get called, right? So if I just say function, now whenever kind of greet get called, this particular function will be get called. Now we have to solve two problems. We have to get the argument, and now we have to actually call the greet method, the real greet method. So to do that, let's have first argument. So a function argument can be get with can be fetched with this particular REST operator, and that will provide you all the argument. The pre-call, the greet will call part is there. That is pretty simple. We can just say logger dot greet will call, and all I want to pass it basically just the arguments. Now the real thing is like how you're going to call the actual method. So for that, I can just have target dot or in the use the square bracket, and let's call the prop, and that will provide us the greet method. But now two more thing we have to, or one more thing we have to do is basically, sorry, two more thing we have to take care of it. We have to make sure that the context or the this object remains correct, and second is we also want to pass the argument. So this object or this will refers to the target in this case. So let's pass the target, and second would be the argument. So just call the arguments, right? And whatever the return value will get once you call this particular greet method, we want to return it as part of this particular function. So let's capture that part. Const dot return value. So let's hold to that now. So we done the pre-call, then the actual call, and now it's a time to do a post call. So let's say logger dot grid did call, and again just pass the argument, right? And when all is done, let's return the value. Let's return the return value. Cool. I guess that's all. Let me just save it and see. Arguments not defined on line 26. Yeah, args. Let's keep it correct. Perfect. So we can say that greet will be called with the argument hi, and then the actual call hi John, and then greet called did greet did called with the argument hi, right? So all this thing. So this is very common observer pattern which we just implemented with the help of proxy. All we wanted, that's all I wanted to cover today. Just provide your comment like what you like and what you didn't like in this particular video. Thank you.